if we are really time between worlds and something old is dying, maybe the society, the civilization, the postmodernity as we know it is dying, almost all of us who is in that reality cannot see what's beyond because we're in it. What we can is to develop the skills to sense and to be curious, to hold polarities and contractions and be present to the invisible, to be able to start responding to what's already there, because that's how I, for now, see it. If we go back in time, you can see people channeling personal Eros, artists, high performance, innovations that has changed humanity forever, perspectives, philosophy, religion. There has been people who have been attuned to the zeitgeist, like to that evolutionary process that is moving through us, and we are individually a part of a whole, and the whole is affecting us, and we are affecting the whole as parts of the whole. So for me, it's really about how can I, and how can we as a collective, how can we as a group tune in together, to listen together, because together we can increase our capacity to hold the complexity of what's coming.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm joined by Rudy, and welcome to Voices of Emergence. And today we're joined by Pamela von Sabljar. She is a transformational and embodiment guide and a fiercely compassionate presence. Her life and work invite us into deeper intimacy with life itself by courageous sensing, shedding inherited roles, and reclaiming the sacredness of human connection. Pamela is known for her precision, her poetic fire, and her unwavering devotion to truth. She holds spaces where the masks fall away and the quiet intelligence of the body begins to speak. Her work doesn't aim to explain truth, but to let us feel it directly in the bones, in our breath, in the moment. In a world that so often teaches us to bypass, numb, or perform, Pamela's invitation is simple but radical. Stay, feel, speak, risk being seen, and lead from there. Together we explore how leadership, rooted in the body, in truth-telling, and in sacred relationality, can become part of cultural renewal. So we ask, what does it mean to live from the wisdom of the felt sense? And how might we reclaim Eros, the emotional, and the wild as essential dimensions of our human wholeness? I would start with a first question, which is, when you hear the word emergence, what image or sensation arrives in your body?
Spaciousness, a sense of lightness, and for me, a rootedness, and I sense life force coming up within my body from down and up.
Pamela, you have been also on a journey of tremendous transformation, and to come where you are now, I'm interested to know a bit of what were the key moments. Were there any cathartic moments, or was it just like an evolutionary journey with insights, or perhaps belief systems that you had let go of?
Oh yeah, that's a very wide question and can have so many multi-layer response. The first thing that came up for me when you started to address the question was both and. There has been an evolutionary journey making its way through, pulling me and living through me. And there has been cathartic moments. So I would say both. And then I've been collaborating either with good capability of integrating the cathartic moments or not. There needed to be many cathartic moments. This is what you could say, like maybe the same insights needed to come along several times because I did not have the proper capacity to integrate it. And then I would also say it has been like you can resist the evolutionary personal journey or the collective, and you can also just let go and say a big and yes to it. And I think I've been capable of doing both, screaming, kicking, and resisting, and leaning in and surrendering. And I understand also that when you ask that question, that you maybe are seeking insights or specific stories, and in one way, I feel very little pulled nowadays to speak into my personal stories around my journey. And at the same time, there is like one thing coming up when you voice the question, is that one thing out of many that I see has been a personal belief, and by that, like a full narrative of how I view the world. And it's both a personal and I would also say a collective narrative. And that is the need of control and the need of, by that, knowing. And that has been a deep part of my journey, to let go of the need to have control of what's happening or what's going on, or letting go of that I need to understand or I need to know, and be, not always, of course, I'm human with all my flaws and imperfections, but on a deeper and deeper level, able to be in the unknown and the not knowing, and being more and more graceful of holding the awkwardness in not knowing and the unknown. And for me, that's deeply connected to facilitating and leading from emergence, as is a part of what I'm devoted to in my everyday living and working. And it's also something that I see when I'm sensing and engaging and responding to the zeitgeist of the future that is arriving, or that I'm tending to, because there is many future arriving at the same time. To be able to navigate and lead through complexity, it seems to be one of the skills out of many that we as leaders need to develop and, what do you say, build. It is the capability of being okay with, have deep trust and faith in the process and what's emerging, and being able to be humble that we do not know what's the next step is or where we're going. And if we're really going to hold space for something new to arrive, then I think we need to be properly okay with the awkwardness that comes with the unknown.
It's also like a letting go and a surrender. And there's a personal journey in this and the collective journey as well. And it goes together. How do you define relational intelligence? And how does that factor in?
There's many threads opening up at the same time in that question for me. And one of them is, we are relational beings as humans. And I receive that we live in an ecosystem in this world, in a relational web, like we are interconnected with everything and anything, no matter if we speak into a linear or nonlinear level. And you could make it simple, and yet it's profoundly maybe hard to hold it. But one, relational intelligence is to know thyself. It's just my relationship, my connection to self, and my connection to other, and my connection to the planet. And in the planet, I'm also pointing towards the wider ecosystem that our planet is connected in. Like a metaphor that we're part of a universe, I actually do have the sense of understanding that everything that happens out there on a macro level, it affects something in here on a micro level. So relational intelligence for me is to hold a very multi-layered lens of how is my connection and relationship with myself, the other. Then I'm not just speaking about the human other, I'm speaking about the other, and then I'm speaking about the planet as a whole and the wider system we're in. Yeah, maybe that's the I would also add on, in the way I see relational intelligence, I would also add on that we are relating to forces that is not always something we can touch or measure, and still they are affecting and powerful. As like I could name, just to try to be more tangible, it's like we do know we have the force of gravity that keeps us on Earth, for example. And even if you go somewhere in the world where they still haven't heard about gravity, I don't know if that place exists, but just as an example, it still works and it still affects us in our everyday breath. And the same is what I would name as Eros, life force energy. It's another force that affects us in our everyday life. And no matter if we know about it or not, it's still there. And so for me, the relational intelligence also is to be attentive to the subtle impulses from our inner knowing that goes beyond the boundaries of our skin, even if the word is pointing towards inner knowing. But for me, it's something that goes beyond matter or the physicality, but still equally real and alive.
Beautiful. Pamela, yeah, before we go deeper into Eros, I know you work and I participated in some of your programs on, you work a lot with polarity and also holding masculine and feminine balance. So can you explain a bit more about that? How do you hold polarity? Because in my view, I think it's one of the most important skills for the future that we will need, is how can we hold polarity? Because now what we see in the world out there, and it's accelerated by technology, is the toxic polarity. There is a healthy polarity between masculine and feminine, between the yin and the yang, that is actually needed for the tension also for us to survive, I think, as a species. So how do you bring that into your work?
Yeah, it's like, this is a tricky one. And at the same time, it's so wide, and because polarity, it's like everything from like order and chaos is like a polarity. Seriousness and playfulness is a polarity. So like polarity is something that can create like a sense of like tension if it gets unbalanced, or if we go into a worldview that one of them is right and one of them is wrong. And still, both are fruitful, right? I would not want to live in just order with no chaos. That would be so dry and boring and possibly rigid. And I would not want to live in only chaos. And at the same with seriousness and playfulness, I want both. Both has a place and a right timing. And in some spaces or purposes needs more of one of them and less of the other, depending on what we actually are there to experience or there to achieve. So that's one thing of just like normalizing and understanding that polarity is just almost like a law of nature. It's just what is. So for me, the problematic is not the polarity. The problematic is our relationship. And again, there maybe we'll come back to relational intelligence. That is how I look at the polarity. And when I have a bias that one of the polarities is better or worse, right or wrong, that's where I can see that's the challenge. And what skills in my inner world needs to be developed so I can hold and be the bridge. Actually, I had a meeting today. I'm going to facilitate a session at the IDG Summit in October in Stockholm, in Sweden. And the theme for that summit, IDG Summit, is bridging polarities. And it's like the core thing that I look at in the design of that session is like, we are the bridge. And you're talking about, Rudy, when you say that you see it as one of the most important things in the future to be able to hold polarity, is to be able to be that bridge. And I see that in our postmodern society today, we are right now at a developmental phase where we're really not so good to hold polarity. And there becomes like almost like a scapegoating, like a true blaming, pointing fingers, and a quite intense violations, like in either direction. We're losing our capability of holding complexity when we do. So that's just like what comes first, like in general, when it comes to polarity. And when we are losing our capability to hold the polarity, we are increasing separation. And we are also increasing disconnection. And then we are having, with the technology, like what you talked into, that if we're just wanting to have likes, then it's even more important to really work with the disconnection and what creates like separation, because that also creates agitation and drama. And because most of us is still responding from a reactive place, and then we get addicted to that intensity, that drama, a lot of emotion gets into, and then we feel alive. But in my reality, it's not really aliveness. It's just distractions to feel something in our very numb and disconnected reality that we live in right now. I'm going to be a bit dramatic now so we can play with that, but it's insanity. Like I receive, we are in this time pretty disconnected and numb and using intensity and distractions as a way of escaping from deep sense of meaninglessness and hopelessness and possibly despair of what we actually feel and the current state. And if I'm going to wrap this question down, where I sit and in my exploration, and here I also talk into that one part of my work is to invite people into a different state of consciousness of where I see the polarity, the feminine masculine polarity is an amazing psychotechnology. But if I would just stay to keep a bit grounded, is that the system, the society we live in right now, most likely the end of postmodernity. It's the core essence of postmodernity, one of them. I'm not an expert in that. I'm just trying to share like the wisdom nuggets I have captured so far, is deconstruction. It is to deconstruct identity and also truth. And one thing we see, because that, why I said in the beginning of this answer to this question, I said, oh, that's a tricky one, because when we name feminine, masculine, very often it's a rise, the whole gender debate. And then the core essence and the potential of the feminine and masculine polarity gets captured and imprisoned in the debate. It gets kidnapped in the debate about gender. And for me, there is so many nuances that needs to happen in the dialogue before we can really speak into the power of the technology of feminine masculine polarity. And where I see that there is possibly a perspective that we as a society and collective in the future will be better to hold. And that is that sex is biology, and out of sex, I'm talking about sex as our biology, not like making sex. Just my Swedish and English, that's not my native language. So it's biology, and we are different. We are inherently different. And our gender is socially constructed. And it's not either off, it's both. And right now in our times, in the collective, we're not so good at holding that tension in a graceful way. And with that, I see that we throw out and don't hear or can't, we don't have so many spaces where we can actually speak into, is there a new way for men and women to collaborate that can bring forward the strength and integrate the weakness that we have been through for something new to arrive? And if we just look at the feminine, masculine as principles, they exist in nature all over. And if you just look at humans, you can see it in our like reproduction organs, like in the pussy and the cock. You can see the receptivity and the penetrative. One is going inward, one is going outward. One is receptive, one is going to penetrate. It's very simple, and you can see it with the egg, and you can see it with the sperm. You can see it around flowers, about insects, and understanding that if we take away that creative tension, we're like, it's almost like we're going on a self-destructive, eliminating, like, how do you say that? Eliminating? Yeah, like taking away, that is where babies are made, and that is what created the universe and stars and all of it. like these two forces. So yeah, I'm noticing I'm not satisfied with my response, but I will let you come in because there's something more here that wants to be said, but now it's not available, so I will just wait.
There's so much to be said about this. It's so rich. After postmodernism, we should go into metamodernism, where you take the best from the other stages, but you're able to hold the polarities better. You don't have to pick the sides. You can allow a third way to come through. You spoke about invisible forces that rule our lives, like gravity, and you mentioned Eros is one of them. What does Eros mean to you? How does it show up in our lives? Does Eros have a polarity?
Yeah, and I think also I've been in the metamodern exploration for 10 years. And I come to a point where I might put myself personally, I don't use that concept or that word anymore. Not because I think it's something wrong with it or anything. It's just that it may be that sometimes concept takes us away from truly being present to what's non-visible and here. And for me, Eros is life force energy. I could also name it as creative energy. I could also name it as sexual energy. And for me, where I am right now in my exploration, I speak about it as the force that fuels the evolutionary process in universe. And it exists, it seems to exist in everything and anything. It seems to be the force that makes the spring come alive after winter. It seems to be the force that when you look at an animal who the life force is like slowly pulling back, as in the trees when autumn arrives. If you live in, for example, a four-season country, and you can see, like when you see a child, like a newborn, there is so much, it's like you can touch that you're so close to that aliveness. So it evokes a sense of sacredness. And right now, I think it was Zach Stein who, the first one I heard saying that we are in a times between worlds. Right now, for me, the only sane seems to be attuned to what makes me feel alive. And it's not a feeling for me. It's, even if I said feel, it's a sensing, as almost like when we came into this meeting and there was a need of a bit more time before we could drop into our conversation. I could sense that there was some rushness, no matter reason, because we're humans and sometimes it just happens. If we would continue on that rushness, it would contract. For me, it's like a felt sense that we have a living field between us. When that starts to contract, it's like we make the potential between us smaller. And then we have less to speak into and speak from and be attuned to. And this is also one part of it. And maybe it's all, but that's not what I've found so far. And I'm open. Like I usually say this, I've been wrong so many times before. So I'm totally open that in 5 years, I will look back to what I said in this moment. Oh my, I really hadn't had that figured out yet. Or now I have different insights. It's turned around the way I look at and relate and how I make up the world out of the experiences I've had and the knowledge and so on that I'm interacting with. I'm just gonna pause because I'm losing the stream. So I'm just gonna see if it comes back. Yeah, so for me right now, only the thing that seems most reasonable is to be attuned to when it feels right in the relational field, in the social field, in my action and choices. This makes me open Because for me, that is, Eros can be sensed depending on your embodiment, depending on the inner work you've done, the relational work you've done with others. You could have different experiences of how it is, but I usually talk depending on what context I'm in. Sometimes I'm talking about the spark, and people are like, I got it. When I'm hosting like leadership training in Alpbach, that is like an event in Austria. If I use Eros there, that would be like a translation interruption. But if I use the spark, people can relate and connect. So it's about being context aware, and then they can say, oh yeah, that's when I feel curiosity. I want to lean in. I see someone in the group and I feel attracted to go there. There's a sense of attraction. There's a sense of curiosity. There's a sense of alivening. It's a sense of animation. There is a sense of curiosity. Sometimes it can even feel like a sexual tension. But the more you explore and understand and learn about Eros, you start to get good to discern, because it's also about your values and the context you're in and the relational container you're in. It's not always, and I also had amazing conversation with people speaking in work environments, how they can feel this like sexual tension with other coworkers, and how they have developed a language of saying, oh, this is my creative partner, because like creativity, sexual energy, life force energy, there is like a creation that wants to happen. It's not about going into the toilet and suck at work, that even if a lot of people do that, we know by surveys that also happens. But what if we would have more consciousness to work with attention for creativity instead of making babies, when making babies is not the thing we should do in that moment? And that's, for me, is if we are really time between worlds and something old is dying, maybe the society, the civilization, the postmodernity as we know it is dying, almost all of us who is in that reality cannot see what's beyond, because we're in it. What we can is to develop the skills to sense and to be curious, to hold polarities and contractions and be present to the invisible, to be able to start responding to what's already there, because that's how I, for now, see it. If we go back in time, you can see people channeling personal Eros, artists, high performance, innovations that has changed humanity forever, perspectives, philosophy, religion. There has been people who have been attuned to the zeitgeist, like to that evolutionary process that is moving through us, and we are individually a part of a whole, and the whole is affecting us, and we are affecting the whole as parts of the whole. So for me, it's really about how can I, and how can we as a collective, how can we as a group tune in together, to listen together, because together we can increase our capacity to hold the complexity of what's coming. I see it as an artist who is like sensing and listening and channeling in art that stays like for sometimes decades, millennia, like hundreds of years, because there was a pattern of something new coming forward. And that's what I also see when it comes to Eros. Maybe we are in a time for be able to be the vehicle of the whole, or the evolutionary process that wants to come through, maybe listening and attending in attunement to that force is maybe the most sane and sacred thing we could do for now.
Wow, that was beautiful, Pamela. Very beautifully expressed. I wonder also, Alex and me, we also do a lot of men's work, and there is this whole need for men to sit together and basically get through their guilt issues, their shame, and all this heavy loads they have been carrying all their life and they need to get rid of before they can actually meet the feminine again, or be in a state that they have been able to sense into their emotions or feelings, and secondly, also able to communicate about that. Yeah, because there are two things that men haven't really learned. But in my communities and networks, most of the inspirational people are women at the time. Yeah. So I don't want to overgeneralize. There are also men, of course, who do amazing work. But I think the inspiration and the intuition to drive man to something beyond of what is, or to steer in a different direction, I think is a very feminine energy, which is very much needed today. So how do you see that feminine energy, or even female leadership? Like, how do you see that? What is its importance for the future of wherever we are going?
At first, I just want to share that I'm fascinated by that in your filter bubble, you have more women who are having that leading role. In my filter bubble, I am mostly right now inspired by a lot of great men. I'm missing women who can hold both high complexity and depth. Yeah. And also both like vertical and horizontal development, and also inner and outer work. So I'm just fascinated. I think it's just the fact we are in two different filter bubbles when it comes to that. I can also notice that perhaps I'm witnessing a bias in myself, because I can notice that I'm a little bit like doing this, or I don't know what the gesture, what would be the posture of my body to this. No, maybe not that, and that, maybe this. No, maybe that's more correct. No, like that. No, that hurts when I hear you say that. And what hurts when I hear what I heard you say, that I feel like no. And I'm not saying this is what you said. I'm just saying that this is what I think I heard, is that I felt you were expressing men's work through a very, not very takeaway, that could be too loaded to say like that, and maybe a little bit too dramatic, or a patriarchal lens, that there is something for men to be guilty about, something for them to own up. And for me, where I sit right now, if that's what you said, I'm not saying you did. For me, it's just, I just said no. Like my whole being and my whole like female body is just saying, no, that's not the way forward. Then I feel that need to like sigh together and just no, fuck no. I see rather that right now, the women, like I host the Nordic Women's Gathering with other profound women, and this is our 7th year, and we are exploring what womanhood is in the 21st century. And one of the core things in that exploration that's been going on for 7 years now is, how can I awaken my feminine so the masculine can rise? And so I can notice like I need the direction of your question again, because I have a flow that wants to come forward, but I just wonder if you could just state the last part of your question again so I can surf on that one.
Actually, so yeah, when men sit too long together, yeah, they need to go through this process of guilt and all that. But then at a certain point, they are willing to meet the feminine. But actually, it goes further than that, that actually the feminine energy is needed for the man also to, as you express it, like how to awaken your feminine energy to bring forth masculinity, because men in the men's groups, they are also rethinking masculinity, and there's so many different types of masculinity that you could go into. But I think mainly in the role of leadership also, like how do you see that evolving, or in your work, how do you see that evolving, that presence of the feminine energy?
Yeah. All right.
Or the masculine as you see it in your bubble?
Okay. Yeah, I would say like this. If I go back to the moment in this conversation where I named that I see that we live in a time when we're very numb and disconnected. When we're numb and disconnected, it means we're not connected to our feminine energy. The feminine energy for me is when I have a boundary within myself and I'm not expressing that. Like I'm not even connecting to it. Maybe I'm not even aware of it and I'm not expressing it. Like this, I'm just taking one example, very small example. And for me, it's like to move and live with the laws and speed of nature. like that I'm a cyclic being as a woman, for example, if I would say for a man, I live within ecosystem. I live within a relational web. Whatever I do here affects what's going on over here. So if no matter if I'm a man or a woman, awakening to my feminine will make me more connected, will make me connected. And when I am having a sense of an impulse within myself as a human, and I act on that impulse, for me, that is the dance between the feminine and masculine, between like chaos and impulse arise. There is an order that addresses that impulse and make that impulse to be met, just to vary. So that's one thing that I see. But then also I do see that I also believe we are in a time right now that it's important for women to reconnect with their feminine. And I do see that a lot of women today in the postmodern society has a masculine shield. And you can see the awakening to the feminine in so many different layers of our society and collective. If it's true that's what some of our thinkers are pointing towards, that we are on a road to self external, like killing ourselves softly, like gently and softly, but very, how do you say, like steadfast. Being awakened to my feminine is about being in service of life and being life and choosing actions that are life affirming. And in that, the man and the masculine will rise to protect, respond, and provide for life. And if we want to have a future that is generative, or even some are more pointing towards a regenerative future, I think that's like in the core of a generative future, is to have a life-affirming and life-serving society. Yeah, I think I will stop there.
I like how you say that awakening to the feminine will make us feel more connected, and we choose actions that are life affirming. And really, it's the idea of Shiva and Shakti. And Shiva is the masculine field of consciousness, and Shakti is the movement of the consciousness. So if you picture a lake as the field, the ripples on the lake is the movement. Now, Pan is very interesting because it's like a half goat, half man. Look how connected to nature I am. Look, I'm so strong. But Pan is also saying, but I play music. Like I have a flute and I play music. I'm enjoying life and I am fully connected to nature. The conversation just brought up this whole process of decolonizing the mind, looking deeply at what are the programs that I have been brought up with, and do I need to hang on to all of these? I wonder how this touches you.
I said how it touches me is like I get a sense of lightness. And you name two things, you name several things, but two things that sticks out for me is like I'm here enjoying the music. I'm here to play. I'm here to create. And you also spoke into like the seductress, like the seduction. And that's very much how I see the relationship with Eros. It's to be in seduction, allowing life to seduce you and allowing yourself to play the music of your soul. And I think that's what on a deeper level, it's like yeah, and I'm really curious how it would be to live in a society when we respond and play and create without it becoming like a fairy tale, because life is also very real and we are nature, and nature is also brutal and it kills and destroys. And it harmonizes, it births lives. Yeah, and also I do a leadership program for female leaders in like a big company, a global company with its headquarters in Switzerland, and where they are, you could say, if I'm going to use your way of wording it, decolonized, like they have a deep program of separatedness and achiever mindset, and that there is overuse of resources, and that we just can keep on growing and growing and growing and growing, as there is no limitation to the boundaries of our planet, or that the resources has an end. And it's fascinating to step into that culture and see people overworked and with so much addiction, but very well functioned, and see what, when they just start to practice skills of self-regulation, and coming back into their bodies and realizing that they are overextending their own boundaries on every day. And when they wake up to the leadership that they hold themselves accountable and others to, and that is not life-affirming or life-giving. And what starts to happen when they start to catch glimmers, and when they're turning the glimmers into glows. Glimmers is parasympathetic state in the nervous system. Like it's from the Polyvagal theory, as you can talk about triggers when your nervous system or getting sympathetic activated. You can talk about glimmers when your system is parasympathetic activated. And that can be like a sun rays, it can be music, it can be connection between humans, it can be a smell, it can be a taste. Like it's very basic and orientated towards our senses. But when they start to just change into, if I lead from pleasure instead of pressure, what happens with my leadership style? What happens with my boundary setting? And what happens with our culture? And just the questions that starts to arise of questioning the narrative that holds this society. That's just also a very just down to earth of how do we speak about this in a very mundane way, because it's about how we live in our everyday life.
Oh, Pamela, I feel like we could go on for hours in this dialogue with you, but being respectful of your time, I have one last question for you. If you could whisper one phrase into the heart of every woman waking up right now, what would it be?
Be attuned to your aliveness.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Pamela, for spending this hour with us and sharing your ideas and some of your work. Is there anything of your work that you want to mention that is upcoming? We will include the links, of course, in our description of the podcast.
I host a masterclass, a 5-month journey in facilitatorship. That's a calling for profound facilitators that want to take their facilitation to a next level, and practicing together with a group of great facilitators to how to lead and facilitate from emergence. And I think I would like to say, I will give you some extra work here. Unfortunately, I need to be honest to my integrity here. And I would say to women, what I would whisper into every woman that is awakening right now is be attuned to your aliveness. That will take you to the right next step. Yeah. And that will call forward men to rise for the society we want to create together.
Even more beautiful. Thank you so much, Pamela.
Before we skip out, can I ask a question to the two of you? I'm curious if you would name one thing in this moment that resonated with you in this conversation, what would you pick out?
I think it's more your presence that I remember from this conversation.
And what effect did that have for you?
Your presence brings immediate calmness, thoughtfulness, being really in this moment. What can we bring? What can we do in this moment together? It brings us to paying attention, really, okay, in this moment. And how do we pay attention to each other instead of all the concepts and whatever that's around and we can talk about? For me, that's what I take with me from your work also, your presence.
Yeah, thank you, Rudy, for mirroring that back, because it touches me when I hear you say it, because I so deeply believe that paying attention together is a gift that we can give to our time. Thank you.
Yeah, I also got that deep presence, even from the beginning when you said, do you guys need more time? Because it feels rushed. So right from the beginning, it was like, I'm here and let's pay attention and let's be present. There's like this relational field you create just by being you. And I felt it's like a groundedness. And also in the middle somewhere you said, Alex, you didn't say it like this, but this is my paraphrase. This is what I heard is, Alex, why do you get lost in concepts like metamodernism and things? It's just a concept. Like, come back to what's real and what's happening now. Remain connected. And so I felt that, and it's powerful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. For me, it's always valuable to see what you hear, because then maybe you show me pieces that is important to underline. And I really want to say thank you so much for your presence and your openness. The quality of the conversation comes through the listener. It's not always what you say, but how you listen. So I really appreciate all the work you've done for us being able to create this space. Thank you.
Sing no more, naked days are you.